When I first decided to review Jumping Flash, I expected to find a relic, something interesting from the past that had, thanks to evolutions in its genre, been left crippled and nigh unplayable today. But instead, I found myself very pleasantly surprised. Now, if you've heard of Jumping Flash before but never played it, chances are you've heard of it in a historical context. This game was one of the earliest 3D platformers, and as such is a very interesting specimen in its own right. This came out before games like Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot had figured out ways to make a really good 3D platformer. And for the most part, developers at this time were stumbling around in the dark. How could they possibly take such a quintessentially 2D genre and move it into this newly three-dimensional gaming world? Jumping Flash's solution is basically a first-person jumper. You play as a robot rabbit named Robbit, jumping around levels collecting robot carrots called jet pods for some inexplicable reason, trying to stop some evil guy from stealing giant chunks of the planet for his vacation resort. Now, this brings us immediately to the game's biggest asset. This thing is absolutely chock full of that trademark Japanese quirkiness that games like Incredible Crisis or the more recent Nobi Nobi Boy were just full of, the kind of quirkiness that often smooths over rough edges. Now, I'm not suggesting that its quirkiness excuses Jumping Flash from any age-induced issues, of which it has a rather large number. Now, this is a very early PS1 title, and in case you're not aware, at launch the PS1 had no dual analog stick controller, or for that matter, any analog stick at all, and they wouldn't have one until 1997. What this means for Jumping Flash is that even though the game is a 3D platformer, there's only one set of directional buttons to control your viewpoint, and for the most part, the game does surprisingly well. You can use the D-pad to go forward and backward or turn around, albeit very slowly, but the inability to look up or down can often result in having to make frustratingly blind jumps. This is somewhat alleviated by the fact that while in the air long enough, the game often points your view downward so you can see what you're about to land on, but that often happens too late or not at all, depending on how high the jump is. Most of the time, I found it pretty easy to look past the game's deficiencies in the control department, but every once in a while the game throws a boss battle at you, a fight that requires more accuracy than the game's rudimentary controls can give. Thankfully, most of the game's boss fights are simple enough to allow you to brute force them without having to find any sort of precision in the controls. And since the boss fights make up such a small portion of the overall game, I was able to make it past the controls and enjoy the game for what it is. A quirky early platformer that, while it may bear the marks of its age, remains highly playable and enjoyable to this day. At the moment, the game is moderately priced on the used market, although if you want it complete in box, it can run a bit high, since it is an early PS1 long box game. Your best bet for getting this game, however, if you don't care about collecting, is probably just buying it off PSN, where it's freely available for cheap, and you can play it on PS3, Vita, or PSP. Every Monday, I look at a game that's at least 10 years old, what I would consider retro, and I see if it's held up today. I don't review it in the context of the time it came out, because those reviews already exist. Instead, I see, is it still worth playing now? If you like that idea, be sure to subscribe so you can see my latest reviews, and if you like this video in particular, be sure to hit that like button. Thanks for watching.